everything is under control. We may have lost one or two commanders, but that is not a big problem.
Can you confirm with specificity that the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei is alive, and separately that the Iranian president is alive right now following these American and Israeli strikes?
As far as I know, yes, they are alive. So everybody is now in its position, and we are handling this situation, and everything is fine.
This is a false claim by Donald Trump regarding the death of Ayatollah Khamenei. Iran's leader, Imam Khamenei, is in good health and is actively directing the course of the war.
One man, 85 years old, sitting at the center of the most consequential question in modern geopolitics. Not whether a war could be won, not whether missiles could reach their targets, whether the person those missiles were aimed at was still breathing. At 2:37 a.m. local time, the first wave of strikes hit Tehran. Not the outskirts, not military installations on the city's edge, the compound, the residence, the seat of supreme authority in the Islamic Republic. And within minutes of those detonations tearing through reinforced concrete and decades of assumed invincibility, a silence fell across every intelligence desk from Langley to Tel Aviv to Riyadh that was louder than anything the bombs had produced. Because nobody could confirm if Ayatollah Ruhollah Khamenei was alive or dead. And then, hours later, Iran answered. 4 words, delivered through state channels, through the very communication infrastructure that had been systematically targeted, jammed, and degraded in the opening hours of the operation. 4 words that carried more weight than any missile. The Supreme Leader lives. Before this story is finished, you are going to understand exactly why those 4 words might be the most dangerous sentence spoken in this entire conflict. Why a proof of life can be more destabilizing than a confirmed death. And why the silence from Washington and Tel Aviv in the hours that followed told a story that no official briefing has been willing to tell. This was never just about one man. This was about the architecture of an entire regime, and what happens when the keystone is struck and nobody can see whether it cracked. The night Tehran was hit, the air above the city tasted like ozone and concrete dust. That is what people on the ground would later describe. Not fire, not smoke, ozone. The sharp, metallic scent of electricity torn through atmosphere by weapons traveling faster than the sound of their own arrival. And beneath that, the powder of pulverized buildings rising through the darkness like fog that had no business being there. The compound in northern Tehran, the one that had served as the Supreme Leader's primary residence and command nerve center for over 3 decades, sat inside a security perimeter that most Western intelligence agencies had mapped down to the drainage grates. Satellite imagery updated quarterly, signals intelligence monitoring every transmission that entered or left within a 4-block radius. Human intelligence assets who had spent years cataloging the shift rotations of the Revolutionary Guard units stationed along its outer walls. And yet, when the first precision-guided munitions struck at 2:37 a.m., the question that erupted across every secure channel in the Western intelligence community was not, did we hit the building? Because thermal imaging confirmed the detonations within seconds. The question was simpler and infinitely harder to answer. Was he inside? A fictional intelligence analyst named Dariush Farmand had spent 14 years working Iranian target packages for the DHS liaison desk embedded with a joint task force operating out of a secure facility in Qatar. He was known among his colleagues for a particular habit. When a critical piece of intelligence came through, Farmand would lean back in his chair, close his eyes, and silently count to 10 before speaking. It was his way of making sure his first words were the right words. On this night, the satellite feed came through, showing the compound engulfed in a thermal bloom so large it whited out the resolution on 2 of the 3 monitoring screens in the room. Farmand did not lean back. He did not close his eyes. He stood up and said one sentence. "We need voice intercepts from the Guard command net. Right now. Not in 10 minutes. Now." Because what Farmand understood, what the people designing the strike packages understood, what the commanders who authorized the timing understood, was that killing a building means nothing. Killing infrastructure means nothing. What matters, what changes the calculus of an entire war, is whether the person that building was designed to protect was still inside it when the sky fell. And the intercepts were not coming through. Not because the equipment had failed, not because the analysts were slow, because Iran's military communication network, the one the Revolutionary Guard used for its most sensitive command traffic, had gone dark, completely, not degraded, not intermittent, silent. And that silence could mean one of two things. Either the network had been destroyed in the strikes, which would suggest the damage was catastrophic enough to sever the regime's central nervous system, or someone had turned it off deliberately, someone who knew exactly what the Americans would be listening for. Within 6 hours of the first strikes, Iran's state media apparatus, or what remained of it, began broadcasting a single repeated claim through every channel still functioning: radio frequencies, telegram channels, SMS messages pushed directly to mobile devices across the country's cellular grid. The Supreme Leader is alive. The Supreme Leader is well. The Islamic Republic stands. No video, no live address, no image of Khamenei standing before cameras with a newspaper in his hand and today's date circled in ink. Just words, repeated, amplified, distributed through systems that had been specifically degraded by American electronic warfare operations hours earlier. Farmand read the transcripts of those broadcasts in the quiet of a room where 3 other analysts sat staring at their own screens, all of them running the same calculations in their heads. He pulled up a file, a classified assessment his team had authored 9 months prior, designated under a codename his superiors had chosen with their usual dark sense of bureaucratic poetry: Operation Hollow Mirror. The file was not about the strikes. It had been written long before anyone authorized a single missile. Hollow Mirror was an assessment of what would happen to Iran's internal power structure if its supreme leader were killed or incapacitated during an active military confrontation. A scenario analysis. A war game played out on paper, and the very first line of that assessment read, "In the event of the supreme leader's death during active hostilities, the regime's most likely initial response will be a disinformation campaign asserting his survival, designed to prevent immediate succession fractures within the Revolutionary Guard's senior command." Farmand read that line again. Then he looked at the broadcast transcripts. Then he closed the file. "We wrote this," he said quietly, to no one in particular. "We told them exactly what would happen, and now it is happening." But there was a second possibility, one the assessment had also explored, and it was the one that made the room colder. What if the claim was true? If you are still processing what you just heard, hold that feeling, because the next part of this story is the part that turns everything you think you understand about this situation completely upside down. Hit like right now. Not for me, not for a number on a screen, but so this reaches every person tonight who is watching this conflict unfold and deserves to understand what is actually at stake beneath the headlines. Stay exactly where you are. What comes next changes the entire frame. At 4:11 a.m., while the fires in Tehran were still burning and the state broadcasts were still looping their 4-word mantra, a different kind of operation was underway in a facility that officially does not appear on any organizational chart published by the United States government. A cyber forensics unit, embedded within a joint FBI and DHS signals intelligence team, had been monitoring a very specific set of communication nodes for the previous 72 hours. Not military frequencies, not government channels. Something older, something that predated the digital infrastructure of the Islamic Republic by decades. A network of human couriers. Physical couriers. Men who traveled by car, by motorcycle, by foot through the mountain passes connecting Tehran to Qom, Qom to Isfahan, Isfahan to the military installations buried deep inside the Zagros Mountains. a communication system designed for exactly this scenario, one in which every satellite could be blinded, every server could be destroyed, every fiber optic cable could be severed, and the regime could still transmit orders from its supreme authority to its most critical military assets. The Americans had known about this network. They had mapped portions of it. They had identified 17 of its estimated 40-plus relay points. What they had not expected, what Farman's team discovered at 4:11 a.m., was that the network had activated, not after the strikes, before them. 12 hours before the first missile was launched, the courier network had begun transmitting. Movement patterns detected by a constellation of surveillance assets showed couriers departing Tehran in a coordinated pattern, fanning outward along routes that led to every major Revolutionary Guard command installation in the country. He knew, Farman said. The room was perfectly still. Someone told him, and he moved. This was not a regime scrambling to respond to an attack. This was a regime that had been warned, and the implications of that single word, warned, were so vast that Farman's supervisor immediately placed a call to a number in Virginia that only 11 people in the entire U.S. intelligence community had access to. Because if Khamenei had been warned, it meant the strikes were never going to find him. It meant the compound was empty when the missiles arrived. It meant the most meticulously planned decapitation operation in modern military history had hit a building and nothing else. And it meant someone with access to the operational timeline had passed that information to Tehran. Go back to the beginning of this video. Go back to the moment I told you that Iran's military communications network went dark, completely silent, immediately after the strikes. Now that you know the courier network activated 12 hours before the attack, that silence means something entirely different. It was not destruction. It was discipline. They were already on their backup system. I will wait. A fictional senior intelligence official named Martin Calloway had served 31 years in federal service. He had overseen operations in 3 theaters. He had personally briefed 2 sitting presidents. He had a reputation within the community as someone who never raised his voice, not because he lacked intensity, but because the intensity was always controlled, always measured, always delivered with the same even cadence, whether he was discussing a budget allocation or a confirmed kill. On this night, the night the courier network revelation reached his desk, colleagues who had known Calloway for decades described something they had never witnessed before. He asked everyone to leave the room. Then he sat alone for 11 minutes. When he reopened the door, his first instruction was not about Iran. It was not about the strikes. It was not about Khamenei. It was about the leak. "We are not looking outward anymore," he said. "We are looking inward. Someone inside this architecture, someone with clearance high enough to see the strike timeline before it was finalized, passed that information to a foreign adversary during an active military operation." 47 people had access to the operational timeline in its final form. 47 individuals across 4 agencies: the Pentagon, the CIA, the NSA, and 1 embedded DHS liaison team. 47 people. Not strangers, not anonymous bureaucrats in a faceless system. People who had sat in the same secure briefing rooms. People who had signed the same oaths. People who had access not because the system had failed, but because the system had specifically chosen to trust them. Someone inside that circle of 47 had done something that Calloway's 31 years of service had not prepared him for. They had not sold intelligence for money. The preliminary forensic sweep of financial records showed no anomalous payments, no offshore deposits, no sudden changes in lifestyle or spending. This was not corruption in the way anyone in that building understood corruption. This was conviction. Someone believed, genuinely, ideologically, with the full weight of their conscience, that the strike on Tehran was wrong. that it would escalate beyond containment, that it would produce civilian casualties on a scale that no strategic objective could justify. And so they had done the only thing their conviction permitted. They had warned the target. He did not betray his country for a wire transfer, Calloway said, standing before a room of people whose faces had gone gray. He betrayed it because he thought he was saving it. And that, Calloway knew, was infinitely harder to detect, infinitely harder to prosecute, and infinitely more dangerous to the integrity of every classified operation the United States would conduct for years to come. Because greed leaves a trail, conviction does not. If you are still here, then you understand this stopped being a story about missiles and compounds a long time ago. Drop the word "inside" in the comments below, because that is where the real fracture is. Not in Tehran, inside. Subscribe, because what we are tracking next goes deeper than anything in this video. And send this to one person in your life who still thinks this conflict is only happening between nations. It is not. It is happening inside them. Everything you heard in the first half of this story, every strike, every detonation, every intelligence assessment about whether those missiles hit their target, go back and listen to all of it again. Because now you know the target was likely not there when they arrived. And someone wearing the same badge as the people who planned the operation is the reason why. Every tactical decision you heard described was being observed in real time by someone who had already decided to undermine it. The investigation Calloway authorized, codenamed internally as Directive Ashfall, expanded within 48 hours from a single leak inquiry into a systemic audit that touched every layer of the intelligence architecture involved in the Iran operation. What emerged was not a single mole, it was a fracture line. Analysts in Qatar discovered that the courier network Iran had activated was not a relic, not a Cold War holdover dusted off in an emergency. It was a modernized system, upgraded, refined, equipped with counter-surveillance protocols that mirrored, almost identically, the detection methodologies used by U.S. signals intelligence to track physical communication relays. Someone had taught them how to hide. Not from commercial satellite coverage, not from allied intelligence services, from the specific American systems designed to find exactly this kind of network. Farmand traced the upgrades back through 3 years of procurement records, disguised as academic research grants routed through a university in Beirut. The grants had been approved by a review board that included one member whose identity was protected under diplomatic cover. That single thread connected to a second thread, a series of encrypted communications between a server farm in Istanbul and a relay node in Islamabad, which connected to a third thread, a logistics company registered in Dubai that had been quietly facilitating the movement of signals equipment across the Persian Gulf for 18 months. Every thread led further from Tehran and closer to the institutions that were supposed to be dismantling Iran's intelligence capabilities. The network was not just surviving Western pressure, it was adapting to it, using the architecture of Western intelligence cooperation as a map and building its countermeasures directly onto that map. Every surveillance technique we deployed against them, Farmand said, reviewing the pattern analysis on a screen that now displayed connections spanning 9 countries. They had a mirror of it, not a copy, a mirror designed specifically to reflect our own systems back at us. The encrypted file recovered from the Istanbul server, buried under 17 layers of partition encryption that took the FBI's cyber forensics unit 9 days to crack, contained a single document. Not an operational plan, not a list of agents, a doctrine. A 42-page framework outlining how to transform Iran's intelligence apparatus from a reactive, defensive posture into a permanently embedded counterintelligence architecture, one capable of operating inside Western systems indefinitely. Not for the duration of this conflict, for the next generation. The system had not been infiltrated, Farmand wrote in his classified assessment. The system had been mirrored. Somewhere in Northern Virginia, in a house that looks like every other house on a street that looks like every other street in that suburb, there is a woman named, and this is fictional, Catherine Bryce. She is 53 years old. She spent 24 years in federal service. She held a clearance level that fewer than 200 people in the country shared. She retired 8 months before the Tehran strikes. She watched the coverage of the strikes from her living room, alone. The television was on, but the sound was low. She was reading the closed captions instead of listening. When the state broadcast from Iran came through, "The Supreme Leader is alive," Catherine Bryce did not react. She did not lean forward. She did not reach for her phone. She turned the television off, and she sat in the dark for a very long time. Because Catherine Bryce knew, in a way that the analysts and the commanders and the briefers and the officials would not fully understand for weeks, that the question of whether Khamenei was alive or dead was not the question that mattered. The question that mattered was how he had known to leave. And the answer to that question was not in Tehran. It was not in Istanbul or Islamabad or Beirut. It was in a room, in a building, in a city she had worked in for 24 years. Power does not always announce itself with detonations. Calloway would later write in a personal memo that was never classified because it was never submitted to anyone. Sometimes it announces itself with absence, with the empty chair, with the building that was supposed to contain a target and contained nothing, with the silence where there should have been a confirmation. And by the time you trace the absence back to its source, you discover that the source is not an enemy. The source is a colleague, and the colleague is not wrong about why they did it. They are just wrong about everything that will happen because they did. Entire intelligence architectures, painstakingly assembled over decades, now face an audit that is not about capability, it is about trust. Schools where analysts are trained, facilities where operations are coordinated, secure rooms where the most sensitive decisions on Earth are made. Every one of them now operates under a shadow that did not exist before this night. Not the shadow of a foreign adversary, the shadow of a question. Who else decided that their conscience outweighed their oath? This was not an intelligence failure in the way that phrase is usually understood. This was an intelligence system discovering that the most dangerous vulnerability it possesses is not a flaw in its technology, not a gap in its surveillance, not a weakness in its encryption. It is the human being sitting inside it who has decided, quietly, without telling anyone, that they know better. Federal investigators say the inquiry is not complete. The 47 names on that access list have not all been cleared, and the courier network that activated 12 hours before the strikes, the network that told the world everything it needed to know about whether Iran had been warned, is still operational, still transmitting, still silent in all the ways that matter most. This story is fictional. The warning threaded through it is not. The names are invented, the fracture they represent, the possibility that the most dangerous breach in national security is not the one that comes from outside, but the one that comes from someone who believes they are doing the right thing. That is a pattern as old as intelligence itself. If this reached you, if it made you sit still for even one moment longer than you intended, then let it move past this screen. Like, comment, share, subscribe, and remember that the most consequential decisions in any conflict are not made by the people firing the weapons. They're made by the people who decide what the weapons are told. Every name, every official, every event in this story is entirely fictional, created for dramatic storytelling purposes only. The agencies referenced are real. The geopolitical tensions described reflect real-world concerns as of early 2025. The story itself is not real.